So guys, it has been a little under a month since Praydogs' groundbreaking open source Unreal Engine VR injector mod has arrived and taken the PCVR community by storm. And this is for good reason, as literally 1,000+ Unreal Engine games now have some degree of VR functionality, with games like Hi-Fi Rush, RoboCop, and Liza P being just a few examples of almost perfect mod compatibility, giving players a litany of new VR experiences to be amazed by and hope for the future of PCVR gaming, as this truly is a game changer for the VR world and certainly pushes the boundaries of what can be accomplished in the VR modding space. But that very hope, I fear, is actually going to result in being a nightmare for PCVR if this once again amazing piece of work is what is solely being relied upon to keep the space going. And as I've said before, mods do not a healthy ecosystem make. Welcome to the simulation inside the simulation. I am Tooodamngolden, your VR Voyager, and today I will be explaining why Praydogs' Unreal Engine VR injector
is not your savior. It's not your savior. It's not your savior.
So before I lay out my points in this video, I would like to once again acknowledge, guys, that not only am I a big fan of the Unreal Engine VR injector mod, but I also recognize that it is truly remarkable that this even exists in the first place, and it has dramatically shifted the entire PCVR culture. But with that being said, I've noticed a perplexing trend, partly fueled by the perpetual hype train that such a landmark release inevitably brings about, and that is the notion that the PCVR industry is suddenly being saved by this singular innovation, when quite frankly, I believe that to be the absolute furthest thing from the truth. Yes, the UEVR injector opens up a ton of new gaming options for players in VR, and I do feel that it is a huge step towards the preservation of PCVR's core fan base. But see, that's the thing. While most people see this as a vessel to onboard new PCVR players, I see it as more of a way to maintain the status quo in terms of the current population of PCVR players, with the added benefit of it possibly bringing a few new players into VR, but not nearly as many as you would probably think. You see, for all the greatness that Praydogs' landmark mod has brought about, there are a couple of glaring issues with the community placing all of their proverbial eggs into this one basket. Firstly, especially with regards to maybe those who may be new to the PCVR space, the learning curve that exists to properly work a decent portion of the supported games with this mod is intermediate to difficult depending on who you ask, and in turn could actually dissuade new players from diving in, as there is a bit of an intimidation factor that exists, especially for newer VR gamers when booting up the Unreal Engine VR injector, and there certainly is a decent chunk of information thrown at the gamer right out of the gate. Now, this bombardment of settings and optimization process that could be considered frustrating, and of course the inevitable troubleshooting steps that will be needed for individual games, are undoubtedly just the cost of doing business for those of us already deep into the PCVR gaming and mod communities, but serve as a potential deterrent from people who may have heard that, hey man, you can play Palworld or Kingdom Hearts 3 with this mod, only to discover that the setup and optimization process is much more arduous than anticipated, and as such, just sticking with the flat game or maybe just snagging something for a standalone headset may just be the best way to go. You see, as much as we may enjoy tweaking the settings, optimizing game performance, moving game files around to achieve that desired experience, you're a fucking nerd, and no one likes you, that mods can provide, we have to realize that most gamers simply want to turn on the headset, pick a title from their library, and, well, play the game.
No shit, Sherlock!
Most people won't spend the time to download and install the 300+ mods needed to make Skyrim VR an amazing experience, or the 240+ mods that I have used to make something like Fallout 4 feel complete and like a brand new built for VR experience. But instead, these people will simply go buy a game on their Quest or PSVR headsets, load it up, and become increasingly attached to the burgeoning standalone marketplace. And then there's the issue of users paying for Unreal Engine games that weren't designed for VR and the potential to be disappointed by them due to the perceived features being lackluster in terms of immersion at times due to things like inconsistent object interaction that may occur with things like items, inventory management, or just general in-world manipulation, not exactly being consistent or, well, interactive at all, leading to potential PCVR users to determine that the hassle and less than native VR experience is not for them, thus opting to stick with the standalone experience or worse, foregoing VR altogether. Now guys, just to reiterate, this is an absolutely gem of a mod that deserves all the praise that is being given to it at the current moment, but there is yet another fundamental problem that must be addressed with this mod being the savior of PCVR, and that is, well, it's free. Kind of.
It's not your savior.
You see, the Unreal Engine VR Injector mod itself is completely free, with gamers only needing to have PC ownership of these Unreal Engine titles for this mod to be compatible. And while that sounds like a steal for players that already own these games, there will undeniably be an influx of new Steam purchases that will benefit these developers. Which, make no mistake of it, I absolutely love, guys, support the arts, but with our industry already being in a bit of a precarious state with particular regards to PC VR development, I can't help but think that our spending power being used on native VR titles would be substantially more beneficial to the health of PC VR in the long run. And of course, with any new and burgeoning market, financial resources are absolutely paramount, even more so in the VR gaming space, where oftentimes studios are just one bad release away from shutting down altogether, as we recently saw with veteran VR development First Contact Entertainment after the disappointing release of the PSVR 2 exclusive Firewall Ultra ultimately led to its premature closing. And guys, this is just the harsh reality of where we are in terms of VR game development. A lot of these studios operate on a boom or bust reality with each individual game's release, and even for studios that do have a successful game or two under their belt, layoffs do always lurk in the background like an always present boogeyman, with successful studios like Archaeac and Ready It Done both seeing this fear become a harsh reality over the course of the last year. Now obviously, Praydog isn't responsible for this being the current state of affairs in VR land, and he has once again developed a behemoth of a game changer in addition to being the architect of my personal favorite mod, with his Resident Evil Biohazard mod being absolutely spectacular. But I can't help but think that right now what PCVR and really VR in general needs is an influx of support for native VR titles to further encourage the development and pushing of boundaries where VR technology is concerned. Which I think is a nice transition to my third and ultimately most important reason why the Unreal Engine VR Injector is not PCVR's savior. One word, 3 syllables.
Legs.
No.
Laziness.
It's not your savior.
So the biggest argument that I have consistently heard when it comes to the UEVR Injector being PCVR's saving grace is that Praydog has fundamentally shifted how VR devs will look at game development with this mod, and that as a result it will cause more studios to get involved in the field. But if I'm just keeping it real with you guys, I do think that given the history and current state of PCVR support, that this notion honestly is complete bullshit. Now, hear me out, and to illustrate my point, we'll use the latest smash hit Palworlds as an analogy for my train of thought here. Now, for those of you who haven't caught Palworld fever, in the game you are tasked with accomplishing a variety of tasks to maintain your character's health, hunger, stamina, etc. And much like traditional survival craft titles, you will collect the materials to build things like shelters, campfires, and storage bins, things of that nature. Stick with me here, guys, I swear there's a point. Now, these tasks oftentimes require a substantial time commitment and take away from the title's main objective, which is to catch, train, and battle your character's Pokemon pals. But An interesting mechanic of the game is the ability to use your you know what, fuck it, let's just call them what they are. Pokemon! Anyways, your Pokemon can do all of the tedious tasks needed for survival, such as collecting wood, cooking meals, and producing resources in your stead, so you are free to explore and encounter more fortuitous endeavors. And that, my friends, is exactly what PCVR developers have been doing for the better part of the last 3 years. That is, relying on the gamers, the modding community, to carry the space forward in their stead. Think of it like this: why would you spend the additional months of time, money, and resources to implement native VR functionality to your game when you can simply focus squarely on the flat version and have somebody else do the additional work for you at no expense to yourself? And that is the issue that I have with the current state of PC VR gaming. The onus to keep the space alive and well shouldn't be placed on the gaming community itself, but these AAA studios, who, make no mistake of it guys, are reaping the benefits of our purchases, all the while putting in the most minimal of effort, should be forced to commit to building from the ground up AAA VR experiences. And that, my friends, is my biggest issue with all of PCVR's hopes being tied to the UEVR injector. It de-incentivizes these larger studios from putting out native VR content as a "why would we do the work when they'll do it for me" type of attitude.
Sure, we'd be happy to take your money. Yep, just go to our Kickstarter page. Okay, nice idiot. Fuck you, bye-bye.
Seems to be the pervasive one in the industry right now, and quite simply, it's one that needs to stop. Guys, VR gaming is amazing, and PC VR gaming itself is truly a spectacle to behold, and this is a medium that really has a lot of potential for great things, but right now the biggest thing VR needs is AAA studios taking the plunge, like we've recently seen Ubisoft do with Assassin's Creed Nexus for meta headsets, but of course within the PC VR ecosystem. And in turn, when these studios do produce these high quality adventures, we must support them with our spending power, as let's face it guys, PC VR gaming isn't exactly the cheapest hobby to have, so even with smaller indie studios, we really do have to continue to support them with funds to allow them the time, space, and opportunity needed to continue innovating. But until we start to see this, unfortunately, it seems that the industry-wide stagnation that we have all felt the last few years is only going to continue dissuading new players from coming along for this ride, thus still not producing enough interest to really justify a major studio taking a chance. And as much as I would love for it to be different, the fact of the matter is that despite how amazing the Unreal Engine VR injector is, one thing holds true. The Unreal Engine VR injector
is not your savior. It's not your savior.
It's not your savior.